Winston Churchill once said, "The further back you can look, the further forward you are likely to see." In 2013, Bethesda Game Studios trademarked the name Starfield for its upcoming space-themed sci-fi RPG. But Bethesda had wanted to make Starfield for a very long time, 25 years to be exact. It had been talked about and discussed throughout the years, and after the release of Fallout 4, development finally began. In today's all-new Starfield video, I'll be looking back on Bethesda's past releases to see what we can expect of Starfield. I'll also be travelling back to 1977. My name's Mike, you're watching Deconstructing the Game. Let's get to it. Many of you will be familiar with Bethesda's open world series The Elder Scrolls and Fallout. If you're not, stick around because I'll be going over how Bethesda typically structures these games, which may provide you with an insight into how Starfield might look and play. I'll also be looking at the similarities between Starfield based on what we know so far, and the 1977 RPG Traveller, along with some other space-themed games along the way. Todd Howard really emphasises that Starfield is going to be a sci-fi epic, and it's one that he has personally wanted to play for many years. He states that it's the be-all and end-all sci-fi game that does a lot of things differently while having the things you would expect in an RPG and more. He went further to say in an interview that this is an enormous game designed to be explored, and it's the biggest, most epic sci-fi game you could possibly imagine. Strong words from a company who designed and released Fallout 76 in the way it was. But I digress. It's important to note that as well as being sci-fi, Todd and the team at Bethesda wanted the game to be as realistic as possible, something that can be relatable and believable. This is going to be a long one, so I'll put some chapters in and try and break down into categories as much as I can, but be aware this is not to hype the game, this is to give you an overview of what's been said and to show you a realistic version of what Bethesda does so you can manage your expectations. Bethesda RPGs are typically story-driven games with a set of main quests that follow that story, with a whole bunch of side quests to complement that story and add extra playtime and nuance. The games typically have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lines of dialogue, and the stories are very engaging and heavy in lore. The games typically start by having you select a character model, complete a quick tutorial style mission, and then you're thrown out into the big bad open world to explore and complete any quest you want, or just explore the world. The character model in the Fallout series was human, and you could select between male and female characters and customize their appearance. In the Elder Scrolls series, you had the option of choosing a different race due to the game being set in a fantasy-like world, with characters like Khajiits, Argonians and Orcs being available as your character. Todd Howard has stated that there will be a way they approach alien races in Starfield, so whether or not you can play as the alien race yourself has yet to be determined. We'll touch on this a little bit later when we talk about the Traveller. Backstories weren't really a huge aspect to these games, although in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, you chose classes that determine buffs and perks, and depending on your race, you would receive different interactions with NPCs. We can safely assume that Starfield will follow the same vein of selecting a class or specialty for your character. But Todd Howard said that players will choose their character's background with many options for customization that will impact how things in the game unfold. Typically this means minor dialogue changes and nothing else, especially if you compare other games' background choices like Mass Effect. People would reference things like your chosen past, but that didn't really impact the game's story. However, Todd also stated that it's more of a hardcore role-playing game and it's got really great character systems, choosing your background and things like that. We're going back to some things we used to do in games a long time ago that we really felt let players express the character they wanted to be. This got me thinking that maybe Bethesda would be taking some character creation elements from Traveller, a 1977 DICE RPG which Bethesda at one point had rights to make a game, but never went ahead. According to Traveller Wiki, Traveller uses a life path style system for character generation. Characters get skills and experience in a minigame where the player makes career choices determining the character's life up to the point before adventure begins. If Bethesda did indeed go down this route, I hope the life path system is more in depth than we got with Cyberpunk 2077 and actually determines the conclusion of missions or outcomes based on our background. It would be really cool to see resolution text grayed out if we didn't meet certain criteria. and I don't mean skills. For example, trying to talk a person out of doing something and not being able to do so because you have nothing in common with that person, or maybe your background clashes so heavily with that person that anything you do is ineffective, resulting in the loss of major story characters. These kinds of events could very well create a whole new dynamic that we haven't seen a great deal of in recent games. Maybe pivotal moments determined by your background won't be so obvious and we're just along for the ride. Or maybe you just start off in a different star system based on your background. This is something Traveller called diversity within limits and incorporates career options and decisions we make during character generation, which limit and frame reality, and the definitions create a diverse space within limits. Something we are familiar with in RPGs is not meeting skill criteria in dialogue. This is common when it comes to dialogue choices in Bethesda's RPGs, and is something we see a lot of in Fallout 4, which can alter how factions react to you, changing whether they are friendly or hostile. Sometimes having the right skill will allow you to skip sections altogether, so I'm sure that decision-making dialogue with skill restriction will be a feature in Starfield as well. Something that wasn't in Bethesda games but was featured in Mass Effect was a karma-like system, which could be a cool feature for reputation, which might change how people react to you, just like in Red Dead Redemption 2. In Traveller, the player can be anything from human, robot, alien, or genetically modified species, with options to select a career type class. In the trailer, the person we assume is us is in fact human, but we could possibly choose another race. The character in the concept art is of human likeness appearance, however it could easily be another biped race. If we have the ability to play as another race, and if the character system is indeed hardcore, then we can probably expect these kinds of character choices to affect how our game unfolds, just like Todd says. Although I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not going to make the same mistake I did with Cyberpunk 2077. I won't believe anything until I see it right now, and I'm only speculating based on educated guesses. I briefly touched on faction interaction earlier. This is something we've seen since Elder Scrolls Morrowind, and according to Todd Howard, there will be a lot of them. Although you are a part of Constellation, established in 2188, the last group of space explorers, which is yet to be explained why, you may be able to swap allegiances or join other factions like the Brotherhood of Steel, Thieves Guild, or even Raider-type factions like the mentioned Crimson Fleet pirates in the recreated document from the behind-the-scenes trailer. Companions are something Fallout and the Elder Scrolls games have as well, and we already know that the robot on the trailer is ours based off of what Todd Howard has said in the past. So expect to see more robots, and possibly even band together some tag-along companions to join you on your journey. Although the tone of Starfield suggests lone wanderer in space, I'd expect companions to join you just like the Outer Worlds. I mean, there does appear to be room for more than one person on the ship after all, so maybe we'll get some friends. And maybe we'll get some romance options along the way as well. All RPGs focus on leveling up your character and your gear, so I'd imagine Starfield will be no exception in that regard. XP will most likely be gained by completing missions and fighting enemies. Combat probably won't be too different from Fallout 4, and depending on the weapons you prefer to use, those will be the ones that will be upgraded quicker than others. It will be interesting to see if they introduce a skill tree like Fallout or Skyrim, and what that might include to upgrade your character. We'll probably have the ability to upgrade your armor and weapons as well, and weapons in space will most likely be energy based like lasers and plasma launcher type weapons, as this weapon here has batteries. But what about the planets that aren't so advanced? Well, expect to get your hands on an old-fashioned 7.62 or machete for when the times get rough. Again, this is something that is detailed in the Traveller, and goes on to mention that the prevailing theory is kinetic weapons are typically the best. I'd even wager that weapons and armor upgrades even present differently and look cooler as they become maxed out. Fallout 4 gave us some functional and cosmetic upgrades, but I suspect that this will be built upon to take advantage of the graphical advances. In a concept art slide, we see various armors, and we also see ships in hangars being built or repaired. Could we see ship upgrade systems like Elite Dangerous perhaps? Todd Howard has mentioned in interviews that the HUD is something he takes a lot of time thinking about. Typically, it's the traditional health, stamina, XP, compass, buffs, debuffs, magic if applicable, ammo count and radiation. In Starfield, we can probably expect to see most of those minus the magic, but we can probably expect to see more information on the screen in relation to oxygen and possibly RCS or jetpack fuel for Aviator spacewalks. We may even have a mini radar to select enemies and see what's around us. I suspect, again, only speculation, but I suspect that time distortion or time travel may play a part in this game. Whether it's slowing down time like in VATS for combat, or having to take into account how time acts differently on other planets, like Interstellar. I don't know if this will be a thing, but the Constellation Watch makes me think that time will play a factor here. The reason I personally love Bethesda RPGs is because of the exploration and the feeling you get when you find something that isn't listed or labelled on your map. The unparalleled freedom of not going anywhere near your main quest objectives and having the ability to freely roam the land doing anything you wish is something I absolutely love in these games, and Bethesda has that nailed down. This is what Todd Howard means when he says Bethesda doesn't want its players being dragged by the nose in Starfield. And it gets me excited when he says things like it's okay to test the game's boundaries. Yes please. I remember playing Oblivion for the first time and being awestruck at the freedom I had. Starfield is a game very much focused on exploration on a massive interstellar scale, so we can very much expect to see various planets and moons that have both been procedurally generated and handcrafted using Bethesda's creation engine too. Todd has said that he wants exploration to be as rewarding as possible, so I can imagine that everywhere you go will have attention to detail and feel very well made. It's more likely than not that when we do explore these areas, we'll be confined to areas within that planet or moon, just like with Mass Effect 1 or the Outer Worlds. The developers may use those pesky invisible walls or geofences, or they could even use the terrain in creative ways to prevent us exiting the playable areas. One thing I would find particularly cool is if they use the day-night cycles of planets to keep us in certain areas due to freezing or skyrocketing temperatures. On these worlds, I would expect to see unique enemies to star systems and specific areas, and I would expect planets to have vastly different geological characteristics and foliage, maybe some lava tubes, caves, barren Mars landscapes and deserts, things like that. How you explore these worlds will probably be on foot, but it's less clear as how we're going to be able to pilot our ship. Will we be able to freely cruise around like Elite Dangerous, or will it be like an Outer Worlds planetary fast travel system? In the past, Bethesda vehicles have been pretty much horses, so it'll be interesting to see what's in store for us here. Since the initial release trailer of Starfield and its release date, we've been shown some concept areas that have been settled by civilizations and colonies. Neon in particular reminds me of Omega from Mass Effect, as it's a place that people go for illicit pleasures, and Omega was pretty lawless in Mass Effect as well, so there are some parallels there. Civilizations or colonies vary in size, some are huge and some are small, and an excerpt from the Traveller details various worlds, but also details some areas are dangerously overpopulated and others are completely uncolonised. But for the most part, planets are moderately colonised by mostly humans of various names. Names like Humanitai, Solomani, and the Zondani. The question is, will we see examples of these in Starfield? The atmosphere of such areas could change drastically and add to the overall character and feel of the game. In the Traveller RPG, humans were transplanted from Earth to other planets, along with animals like wolves. This was done by an advanced civilization called the Ancients, until civil war wiped them out. Could we find ourselves exploring ancient ruins to find the clues to this mysterious ancient technology detailed here? And could faster than light technology be left over by the Ancients like the Protheans in Mass Effect? And is this why the Wolf-Raptor hybrids called the Ashta roam Aquila? Obviously I'm speculating a bit here, but there does seem to be quite a bit of parallels and a lot in common here with the Traveller. Traveller also has a reboot called Traveller 2300 or 2300, and when was Starfield set? Yep, 300 years from now. I don't typically believe in coincidences, and Todd Howard did say that they were uniquely positioned to pull this game off, so I'm guessing that's because of the amount of RPG experience they have with making the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series, but also the insights they got from the Traveller and other space genres. Incidentally, on the 9th of July this year, Rob Wayland released an article in Forbes magazine stating that now is a great time to get into the legendary Traveller, but he never said why. Makes me wonder if he's got some inside information about Starfield coming up in 2022. And for anyone who enjoys Cyberpunk 2077, you can probably thank Traveller for planting the seed into Mike Pondsmith's head and getting him sucked into that RPG game set in which he created Cyberpunk. Starfield is described as being NASA-punk. It's in the future, but you can see that spaceflight is relatively new and particularly dangerous when it comes to travelling regularly and especially over vast distances. The technology is available, but it doesn't look as futuristic as one might have expected, and faster than light travel may only be available through ancient alien technologies. Communications also follow real-world physics, so there's no FTL comms, which means you'll have to find ways to work around. This is also tied very closely to the rules of Traveller, where it details such limitations. There is a semi-realism Bethesda want to keep here, and being a space nerd myself, I can appreciate that. I can probably describe my desk as being NASA punk, so better keep those helium-3 tanks topped up. Todd Howard has said that the way they build in Starfield is very much the same as they have done before, so I expect to see separated interiors from exteriors, like the cities in Skyrim where you enter them and then everything outside despawns. I'd expect that to be loaded separately, which means it stops people like me from clipping in and looking for stuff. But it's also because they've done this for years, and if it's not broken, why fix it? There's one thing I do hope Bethesda perfects, and that is the third-person camera. They've said that Starfield will be available in first and third person, but if you've ever played Fallout or Skyrim, you'll know that the third person isn't the best and can look a bit janky. I personally play in first person, but I'm also one of these people that enjoy seeing their character after I spent ages creating them. If the game was reminiscent of Dead Space in third person, then this would add a whole new level of enjoyment for some people. Fallout 4 introduced some fairly in-depth settlement building, and if you built the vault underground, you'll know that some of the pieces looked very spacey and modular. So you never know, maybe Starfield will introduce something similar, but if you have your ship, then I don't see a huge functionality for settlements in the game. I can see something like building turret defenses or something around your ship, but as far as actually settling something down to live in or sleep in on the planet, I don't really see the point. All in all, I think Starfield will feel very similar to the RPGs you've played from Bethesda game studios before. It will be much larger than Skyrim, and by its very nature will be designed to be played for hundreds if not thousands of hours, but I guess only time will tell if Starfield will be received by RPG fans and space fans alike. On a side note that I had, Fallout and Skyrim were released on VR eventually, so there is potential for Starfield to be fully fleshed out in VR for all you guys who want to be fully immersed in that world. It's also hard not to notice the similarities in the art style between the ship in Starfield trailer and the ship in the Outer Worlds. It's not exactly the same, but you can still see that there are some references to those games and the art style is quite similar. Obsidian did work on Fallout New Vegas, so there could be a little bit of interdepartmental communication between those teams on the art styles and how they made the ship, because there's also some similarities in how the ship looks on the outside as well. You never know, we might get a different version of the Outer Worlds, just bigger and better. This has been the first Starfield video I've done for Deconstructing the game. I appreciate it's rather long, but hopefully the chapters have helped you out. I would say if you've enjoyed the content here, check out more of this on YouTube, but seeing it's the first video I've done for Starfield, all you're going to find is Cyberpunk. But if you have enjoyed it, stick around because I might do some more deconstruction videos based on the trailers, and I might dig into some more spacey lore to see if that would connect with Starfield in any way. We have got a Cyberpunk 2077 competition going on, details of that are in the description below. Hope you've enjoyed the video guys, my name's Mike, this is Deconstructing the Game, and as always, I'll catch you later.